what their tolerance level is. Oh, sorry. Then
Okay,
what their
keep going.
tolerance level is,
Right.
what does that mean for us? And then, um, one of the points that he brought up was that if that the one option is that the assessors just give the survey to the people who are comfortable with the tech, but then we're going to get biased data. And I feel like there's potentially like an equitability issue there because there is a little bit of a financial incentive. And so, or a financial, whatever we want to call that. I don't think we're allowed technically to call it an incentive, but
I
whatever
mean,
we're
they
allowed to
can't
call that.
participate. Yeah, it's a barrier to participation that, I mean, it hurts us from the standpoint of we're not getting the full group we want to get. And then there is the question of, yeah, you can't participate. Well, you can have requirements to participation, but they're usually not necessarily. I mean, you don't go out with like, yeah, let's make it to the tech you can't use when the goal is to have the whole group. Sometimes you'll be like, well, we really only want users who know this tech and here's why.
Yeah,
But you also have to make that case sometimes then to IRB about like, why aren't these people being allowed to be part of
right.
this? And that was not part of what we did because we were not looking at we didn't think we had a barrier.
Right. So I guess the first question that I thought of when getting this feedback is, if we want to still be able to administer these surveys in New Mexico, do we want to look at the survey questions and determine like what are just the critical path elements of data that like really we like what is kind of the minimally viable product in terms of that survey? Like what's the least amount of questions that we can ask and capture the data that we want to capture? That was
Right.
kind
Yeah.
of the
I mean, I'm not disagreeing with you, but this is, I mean, it's kind of like saying, I mean, just like you guys would the tech folks would have a trade-off in the level of what they were doing. I did cut some questions
okay.
from and some things like that. So
Um,
it's possible, famous last words, that I might have shaved a few minutes off of it.
okay.
I'm thinking I did. I mean, because there was something like, oh, let's get rid of that and and I think that's where the question about, and I still have it in there, but it would be really easy to get rid of it. That there's a question about like, which do you prefer, time or money? Like if you're going
Okay.
to save one, and so I reworded that one, tried to make it more, and actually not having them compete with one another, which is harder to deal with, but to say, so how much do you care about time? How much do you care about saving time, saving money? And you put them, because they're putting them as, on two ends of a spectrum, they are not opposite of each other, you
Mhm.
know? And so it's like, you can be sad and happy at the same time. And so you're forcing when you don't necessarily need to. But I agree with you, Whitney, definitely, that we want to cut anything that is not going to be that useful.
Mhm.
Definitely. And so I'm trying to think,
We could
yeah,
also discuss, I mean, I don't know that we'll be able to come to any decisions without Erica here necessarily, but
yeah.
one of the other things we can consider that Will brought up previously is how can we administer this survey to people who can't use the tech?
And also people who aren't the person who owns the house. So one of the questions that I left when I sent it off to you guys and said, okay, so we have to decide who do we want to have take this and to what extent can we push that onto the folks in New Mexico to be sure, well, am I giving this just the teenager who knows how to use the tech? Or
Yeah.
is it the homeowner? Because we really want the decision maker or a decision maker about the house.
Hmm.
They don't have, I mean, so if it's joint decision, great, but, and I don't know, and that was one of the big things, like, criminy, because the questions are phrased in a way that you have to, um, we really don't care about that teenager. I mean, we
Right.
care about that teenager, but we do not care about that teenager's view of the house if the teenager's not one of the people making a critical decision about the house. Um,
I
and I
mean,
don't know if it,
sorry,
what,
go ahead.
well, what I'm wondering almost is, this may not be the way to do this survey.
So then what are our options?
Good question. I don't, I mean, it begs that massive question in life. Or is there a way, and I agree absolutely that we don't want the tech to be the barrier.
Mhm.
What that would do for a written survey, we did have some pieces of it, like it asks like, so like, what are some of the features of a home? Like, do you have, we now say, do you have a working washer? And I said, we probably should go, do you have a working washer? Do you have a working dryer?
Yeah.
And if they, let's say they mark yes to the dryer, then they would go off to a question that might ask them about the lint trap. But if they don't have that, then they don't go there. So, with the technology, you can put the trees in.
We can do that in a printed survey too, though, because we could just say like, if yes, or if no, skip to question 10.
Right, and we can. I mean, I'm not disagreeing with you. We want to, I'll be honest, it's been a while since we've had to do that, but we did that, we've done that before. We just want to, yeah, make those signs big, like forget this one, come down to this one, that kind of a thing. And you're right, we could. We may also want to cut the number of things we're asking about. Like, do you have this and this features on your home? We were trying to get at that idea of maintenance, their maintenance behaviors, associated with the features of their home that they like. Do they change their furnace? Do you have do you have a furnace? Do you change the filter? That kind of a thing. But I do think that, I mean, you've hit on two big things, which are, like, well, one of mine is like, are we going to be able to get the group we want to get from here? And, and if the answer is yes, then probably the assessors are going to be, needing to ask a question early, like that we need to give them some hard and fast rules about, yes, this kind of a person would qualify, and no, this kind of a person would not. And then
I feel like it may be worth me reaching back out to Troy and asking him, how would your assessors feel about the option of having either the tech or a printed survey to administer? Because sometimes I feel like there can be, like, just thinking about like human behavior, right? If you already have a cortisol spike from being handed a tablet that's intimidating to you, like I used to teach like entry-level computer basics courses to people who'd never used computers before. And there is like a very real stress response to sitting down at a computer. Like I would have people ask me like, but what if I break it, when I would show them how to turn it on? Like you're not gonna, like if you ran it over, you would break it, but like you're not gonna break it by pushing a button, And so it's like if you're already handed this device that you're not familiar with, you're not comfortable with, you already have a little bit of a stress response, which is probably also gonna affect how you answer these questions, which we really don't want. Like we want them to be in their like natural, normal, relaxed state when they're answering these questions, right? And so if they're able to give an option like, oh, do you prefer paper or tablet, and they can choose, like they're given the onus of control, right? And inherently then given like that confidence level in being able to answer those questions. So my feeling is it might be worth just asking Troy, if that option existed, would that kind of lower that barrier for some of the assessors?
Well, it sounds like, my first answer is yes, let's find that out.
Okay.
But B, we can just go all paper and just go that way. It's not that, I mean, you have time associated with then entering that data, but it doesn't take that long.
That be on us though, right? Like
that would be on us, right? So that they would just be mailing them back to us as those printed copies. And then that's exactly right. Then we would be entering the data, and that's, we used to do that all the time. So,
like that's
and sometimes that's a kind of a neat way to learn your data, quite honestly, is because you start to notice things and you can see funky stuff that, like when they answer in between numbers, and then you decide to make a rule that you can't do 4.5. You either got 4 or 5, and we're going to go down. And so it's a 4, and you make that your rule, junk like that. I think the second question for Troy would be, if we really wanted the person who takes the survey to be someone who's involved in making decisions about the home, like the home and its maintenance, or the home and its, like, or they're a major decision maker in the family, or something like that,
Mhm.
how they would, the assessors would feel about having, or about asking that question, maybe even, or
Okay.
that, because if they're uncomfortable, or they see that as a barrier or a difficulty, that tells us a lot too.
They may already have that baked into the assessment process, so I think it's worth that. I can actually check with Paul. Paul might
Okay.
have a really good idea on that too, because they may need to make that determination in order to ask permission to like access different areas of the house and things like that. So I'll ask Paul before I ask Troy, but I've also made a note that if Paul doesn't have that answer, that I'll ask Troy as well.
Yeah, because it could be that, I know that they were, and I may be remembering a conversation wrong, so correct me if I'm wrong, that they would sometimes say that it might be like, a teenager who's home, like, is doing it, or it's a family friend who comes over and
A
unlocks the
neighbor
house, or
or,
a
yeah.
neighbor, that kind of a thing, or it's the grandparents who live in the house, and they might be part of the decision-making group, and if they are, then we would say okay to that. So if we could find out some more about that piece of it, because it sounds like that was one of the things that Will uncovered, was that we weren't, the people who would then take it, either because of that technology, or it sounded like also because of how we had phrased questions and things. It dawned on me that potentially the reason that, it was a little surprising, surprising from the standpoint of, we just didn't know the audience, and that was stupid of us. And I'm not talking about you, us, I'm talking about me, us, the people. So sorry. I want the stupidity to go the right way in that statement, and it's sort of, but um, uh, it's been a while since we would have written I've written a survey for someone who like has not seen someone ask them a strongly agree to strongly disagree kind of a question, and that once you've done that a few times, so like, and I was thinking about, like, I think, Ellison, that we use some folks from the Healthy Homes place maybe to look at the survey or something. They may have had
You're
enough
talking about
surveys.
like the piloting of it, like the
Yeah,
trialing. But they were
yeah,
really a knowledgeable pilot.
yeah.
Yeah.
And that didn't dawn on me until we got that feedback from Will, and I'm like, oh, that was
Yeah,
not a brilliant idea on our part. Again, not trying to,
Yeah.
It was a good lesson.
yeah,
Um,
right.
but it hadn't dawned on me that we had not captured that true pilot. But that's the beauty of what Will did,
Yeah.
is we have a really good pilot. That's a great pilot. And so, like in our field, or in my field, like, when you write up the results of something like this, you're talking about the pilot and what you learned there and how you then fix things. And that is really good information for the next people behind you who are doing that study, is that
Mhm.
these were barriers and this and that. And so, and we'll even do papers on, like, lessons learned, and, that are really helpful to the discipline from a methodological standpoint, and junk like that. But I think that was surprising, but it was also this kind of thing, like, okay, so how can we phrase these so that they're getting at what we want, and they're understandable, and
Mhm.
and so it's excuse me, and that's what some of the things I tried to do when I went in and said, hey, what about these kinds of revisions? So we got rid of the strongly agree to strongly disagree extravaganza, and there may be still some like that, but I tried to use different anchors and tried to cut down on how many of those there were,
Mhm.
and some things like that. But I do agree that we need to, those two fundamental questions that you're mentioning, Whitney,
Mhm.
you know, really, set the stage. And then I think Erica and Pi and I, and certainly anyone else who'd like to join that, kind of look at, okay, what were the variables we were trying to measure? How are we measuring? Now that we've cut this where are those measurements? Are there other things that we can cut? You know, what else did we learn from the pilot that can help us to refine this survey?
Yeah. Okay, so I can reach out to Troy and get some of that feedback and see if that's a way for us to kind of create more accessibility and equitability in how the survey is administered. And I think that that can help inform some next steps too.
Yeah, yeah, and I think the key one of, I mean, both of those are key, but especially if the assessors don't feel like they can really determine, like, are you a decision maker on your house or not? We might be able to put a question at the beginning that
That's
would,
wondering.
yeah, we could put and what we would do in that case probably would be, okay, you're not, we'd probably still have them take it. I mean, because then it's the thing of, it's a, it's that thing of, we would be able then though to know who they were and could use, maybe even use their data, but would be using it in a different way. Or, you know, knowing that I'm not a primary decision maker in my home, but in this home, but I am in this home even. And then they could answer questions about their home. And that would still be part of our sample. So
It
we
also
wouldn't have to
creates
completely
that
get rid of it.
habit for the assessors of just like giving it to everybody or giving it to most people, you know, and then just kind of creating more of a routine behavior around it versus having
Yeah.
to determine whether or not to give it.
Yeah, and I think the disadvantage would be a monetary one, from the standpoint of, we might get a lot more, I mean, well, we might hit our N, whatever, I think, I'm gonna say 300, but I think I'm making that up. We would get to there faster and we might not have as many of the kinds of people that we're really hoping to get. And it might be that the assessor, if it's clear to the assessor that the person, you know, is 16 and they're probably not a decision maker, that maybe like not that person, or there could be some rules like that they would could follow. But that if we did have we put in a fairly, you know, certainly an easy question at the beginning, kind of getting a feel for who they are, then that would be a way to deal with that. And the assessor could just be like, oh, we're asking, you know, this is what the survey is about. Please take it, da, da, da. And that's easier on their end. Definitely. Yeah.
Okay, Kristen, I feel like I just launched into this without even checking if you had an agenda. So,
No, it's good conversations. I think what I had planned, we really need the full team, or at least Erica and Pi to be involved. What I did was take Marily's like kind of notes and Tammy's notes and Erica's notes and cloned the survey and identified what ones we need to review. So we were just going to go through like each one and like review or say, yep, that's good, or remove, that sort of thing. So, but I don't think that we could do that right now.
you want to look, I can't remember exactly which dates Tammy said that she wasn't going to be here and that the meetings were kind of flexible, but whatever the next one is, maybe we want to reach out to like Erica and just have it be a communications team meeting for that specific purpose.
I do think there could be a little bit if Christian and Ellison and Carson and Jordan and Daniel have not tons to do. I mean, showing them some of the things we tried just to kind of get to vet it more. I mean, I vetted it to my husband, you know, I'd be like, hey, Greg, what about this? He's a social scientist too, so that helps, but he also is kind of, I mean, we're trained in the same way, so that it hasn't. So, I mean, we could do a little of that, but I agree that having them here, you know, would be the most useful. I do think that also I was just going to mention that Tammy's suggestion that that MISO look at it. That I talked to him when we had the meeting last week, and he's like, yeah, he's happy to do that. And I mean, I think that's a great idea. You know, things like that we can.
He did go through the original one, the translation of it, and so I know that Taylor got it translated professionally. I think I want to say, but he went through it again to make sure that it made sense, and he kind of changed a few things that like just
Yeah.
more conversational tone. So I know that he did
Right.
a few of that, but he's gonna have to redo it because we're changing a lot of the text as well. So
Yeah, and I know that we did this on a survey, well, we did recently, my daughters are bilingual, and so I made them read it because
Mhm.
and they changed that survey some to get it more friendly, or that's not quite the right word, but to say it in a way that would be more typical in some places and things, and it was like, oh, that was nice, and it was one like this one where it was professionally translated, and then we made them read it, and they changed some stuff, and that was helpful. I know he said something to me about he could really read it the next time, maybe with the lens of his parents.
Mm,
You know, and because it sounds like his parents would be really a piece of our primary audience. And so and he may have done that the last time, but I think him thinking about that is like, oh yeah, that would be fantastic.
mhm.
Because I think there probably are still things that are goofy in it, in the scheme of things. But I like the idea of reaching out, seeing if this next meeting or there's a meeting coming up where we can uh really look at the survey. And it could be that um, Eric and I need to go back and revisit what the original questions were, like, the higher level questions we were trying to get at. Um, the survey, it doesn't really, well, it's trying to get a bigger view of the audience, of the group of people who might adopt this kind of a technology or might have that opportunity. And so it's not directed directly toward this particular technology, but trying to get a bigger view of what they care about and what they and the decision levers for them, or the decision points, like what would cause them to go one way versus another a little bit. Yeah.
Okay, so do you so the next open Sapphires team is not here is in 2 weeks. I think the next one, Erica wants to do like suggestions from the comms team of the whole study, I believe. I'm not sure what the scope of what she's doing just exactly, but so do you feel like it's more beneficial to meet right now, like during this time period, or could you and Erica and Pi, I can send you the link to the changes that you guys made already, and then kind of review that together, and then we can, if needed, we can meet again on a Friday. Or what
I
do you?
think probably, yeah, I mean, as far as if you, or like you said, in 2 weeks there was an open meeting.
Mm-hmm.
Because I mean, that could be that we take that meeting, and if in that the prior 2 weeks we were able to now that we see, like, now that it's in there, thanks for doing that, Kristen, because that, I know it got really, well, at least on mine, it got really messy, and I know I had lots of arrows going places, and
I've seen worse.
oh, good, I'm glad, because I was like, oh my gosh, I feel so bad.
Oh no, you're fine.
So, seeing it and seeing like what it looks like sort of now before showing it to a bigger group, that would be a good
Right.
idea. And then that would also be a much better use of the time and the expertise that and the what's the word I want, the views that all of you guys could give us to that survey once we got it in better shape, and you're helped us a long way by putting those suggestions in. So so my really long answer is yes, or got me a while to get to it. So yes, in 2 weeks, if we could have that meeting, and then the goal would be that Erica and Pi and I would get together in the meantime, look at the survey that you've put in, and see what else we want. Is there anything else we want to do? Are there other things we could cut coming into it? Thinking, from Whitney, what you were saying about, yeah, we really do need to, we're trying to pare it down, and particularly it's usually those harder questions, which are the key ones, but also, I mean, we threw out, I mean, like I threw out, I think all the knowledge questions, or we can just throw them all out. If I didn't throw them all out already about air quality. What was surprising too, and I think I tried to get at it, was if you had, like, it's like if air quality is not on their radar, we don't want to ask them about it. We don't want the survey to cause them to make, we're not trying to measure them building an opinion right in that moment. And so the new way kind of tries not to do that. And it could be that we don't get, that air quality is not something that's on their radar, and that's good to know. So yeah, let's do what you said.
Okay. And
then we
I,
Half an hour back, which is great.
yeah, and I think what'll make it a little easier this time to review is I'm gonna label the questions like with numbers. When we send out the final one, it won't be labeled because I think that overwhelms people if they're like, ooh, how many is there? But so yeah, I think that'll be easier for you guys to review as well. But I will send it out with your document just because there's still a few that need to be referenced to your Word document that I didn't change in the actual one. So, okay, I will send that out. And then, is there anything else anybody needs to bring up?
The one thing I would say would be then thinking about, Whitney, what you said about maybe going all paper, we can look at it with that in mind.
Okay.
And so that's a good context to have now for that next meeting. In the scheme of things too.
And I probably will have an answer back from Troy by then too. So he's usually pretty fast about email, although I know he has some travel coming up. So I'll send it to him today so we can see if we can get a response before then.
Oh, that would be great. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Happy Friday, everybody.
And Kristen, I'm sorry for jumping in and
No. It's fine.
Oh my gosh.
No, I think that was a better discussion than what I had planned since we don't have the full team. So it was needed. I mean, it's part of it. I know there was a couple pieces that we were going to bring that up anyway. So alrighty.
Okay,
have a good weekend, y'all.
Bye guys.
Yeah. Thanks, Whitney. Thanks, Millie and Kristen.
Thank you.
Bye.